Hello everyone, welcome. In this video, let's talk about how to approach the small knight's enclosure from the 3-4 point. As we mentioned before in previous videos, this is a very good enclosure to surround the corner territory. After black plays this small knight's enclosure, it is impossible for white to immediately take over the corner territory. And this is why it was one of the most popular enclosures back in the days, before the age of AI, because human players thought this enclosure had such a strong control of the corner territory. However, in the age of AI seems to slightly disfavor this move, thinking it is a little bit slow. Why is it slow? Because a small knight's move, in essence, is a one-space extension. Right? There is only one space between them. And the reason why AI doesn't like one-space extensions is because it is simply a little too slow. And it has the risk of being over-concentrated. So it is just a tad bit inefficient. But due to its very strong control of the corner territory, this enclosure is still highly recommended for beginners and most amateur players. But when your opponent place this enclosure, what are the best ways to approach it to make it slightly over-concentrated and inefficient? So that is what we are going to explore in this video. What are white's options after black makes this enclosure? So these days, the most common one will be right here, A, this shoulder hit. Although we'll also see B, right? We'll also see this attachment. There are some other moves that you might have seen in older games, like playing on the inside or playing on the second line here. Not recommended, right? 1 and 2, not recommended. Or attaching from this side, slightly worse. Or number 4 here. Now this is getting a little confusing, but we'll get to all these moves, right? Number 4 used to exist, but in the age of AI is telling us this is not as effective as A or B. So let's start with this shoulder hit. This move's goal is pretty clear. It is playing on the 4th line against this stone right here on the 3rd line. Right, so it's basically saying there is no way that black can get to the 4th line and trying to develop on the left side here. So can black take sente in this situation? Actually, yes. Black can play elsewhere, anywhere else on the board. And this will be the equivalent of a 2-space approach by white first, right? This will be white playing here first and black playing here second against the 3-4 point. So this is perfectly fine, actually, for black to take sente in this situation. White most likely will block here, right? And it'll be something like this. So white will get a wall facing the left side, and black will still retain the corner territory. So that's one way to proceed. If you really dislike, or if there's something that's really urgent elsewhere on the board as black, this is definitely not the most urgent, because number 1 is not threatening the corner territory. It is preventing black from developing a 3-dimensional moyo or influence on the left side. That's what this 4th line stone is all about. And of course, this is not confined to this situation, right? This shoulder hit against the stone on the 3rd line is very, very common in Go. It's a very common technique. So how should black respond if it wants to? Intuitively, you might think crawling or extending here on the 3rd line. But this is not optimal. This is okay, of course, for amateurs, beginners, most players to play. But this is not optimal because, as we've seen, exchanging stones on the 3rd line with stones on the 4th line is never a good idea for black in this situation. So after this exchange, white can actually take sente. White can play elsewhere. And this is totally fine. One key thing to remember about these approaches to the corner enclosures, and that's why these variations are a little bit difficult to understand for amateur players, is that these approaching stones, like this white stone right here, is not that important. It's not that important. You can throw it away right after you play it, right? And the idea here is that it's not worth it for black to add a stone here, right? This is too slow for black. Black just cannot afford to spend a move to take care, to try to kill number 1. And that is why number 1 is also a good move for white, because it can be utilized sometime down the line, whenever white wants to, right? Because black cannot play a move here, because this will be the equivalent of black playing a move here, another 1-space extension. As we mentioned, 1-space extensions are very, very slow, right? If it's this will be the equivalent of this. Of course, 3 and 4, not a great exchange for white, but having an extra stone here at number 2 does not help black. It is a very slow way for black to play, and that is why white doesn't need to answer. White can throw this stone away and is happy if black actually spends another move killing it. And so that's the idea. As beginners, as cube players, most amateur players, we want to hold on to our stones when we play, right? Especially when it's part of a Joseki. We want to hold on to our stones. We don't want to throw it away. But tactically speaking, this is a good way to proceed for white. You just throw it away. This is 1 on 3. You're not contesting the corner territory. You're not doing that much, right? This is just an exchange. White actually already benefits because of what white can do next here on the 4th line. And that is why black's optimal response in this situation is number 2, right here on the 4th line. Right? So this is not giving white an opportunity to keep playing on the 4th line here. Number 3 will be doing very little, right? It's not really preventing black from coming out on the left side. And once again, white can actually take sente. This is, you can just throw this stone around, and it's not, this is not important at all for white. This is just an exchange, and when you want, you can play this jumping move sometime down the line. So this number 1 will work as a good setup for number 3. And that's it. And that's all white wants in this situation, right? It's not about territory. It's not about influence in terms of building a wall, right? You're not building a wall. You only have 2 stones here. But these 2 stones will limit black's outward expansion, right? This will limit black's influence. And this might connect with elsewhere on the board when white has influence or moyo. So that's the idea. It's a little hard to grasp, especially for beginners and many cube players. Like, why do I throw a stone there if I don't even want to save it? Well, you can use it later, right? So that's really the idea, right? After number 3, there's really not anything black can do. In terms of a Joseki, of course, you can keep building on the upper side. This will just be an extension trying to build territory. So there's not much black can do. What about moves like this, right? This is where black is getting more and more over-concentrated, right? Number 1 can be thrown away, and white will have more influence on the outside. So this is not a great exchange for black. So there's not much black can do. Maybe this, if you want to keep developing on the left side, but these are not that important. These are not that important. Similarly, it's very, very slow for black to play number 4 if white plays away. Right? Number 1 is really just a throwaway stone, and it's not worth it for black to treat it so seriously. So that's something that might be a little counterintuitive for many amateur players, and this is something you need to start to understand. So after this move, what white is really trying to do is to limit black's development on the upper side as well. So that's where you get number 5. So this is white's ideal setup, right? So black most likely will have to play a move. If you play away again, then white has this honey. Black can only extend, right? You cannot come down here. This way you lose the corner territory. And white has divided half the corner, right? And there's more ice space here. So this is not great. This is not going to be great for black because the corner territory is mostly gone. So black will have to respond if white plays the attachment. And if you play number 6, then after number 7, this honey still exists, right? This honey still exists. It's quite a bit of a headache, actually, for black here in the corner. So black most likely will have to stand down here. And now this is a very good shape for white. Even though black still has the corner territory, white has a very nice setup on the outside, very strong, and black can no longer develop here on the upper side. So this is an ideal setup for white. And this can be seen as a Joseki because white has invested an extra move on the outside after the enclosure, right? Black gets to play away for a move, but white gets a very nice setup on the outside that effectively contained any potential for this corner enclosure. What about other moves? What about playing here on the second line? Well, white has this move, right? Black can't really just capture number 7 here because this way, right? This way, black will be cut off. And this is not okay for black, right? You need to be a little careful. We're going to see this again, right? If you play number 6. So most likely it's going to be something like this. Of course, black can break out, but white will get to capture this stone in sente, and white still has a pretty nice shape. White is basically already alive. So black probably will just connect here, and once again, white gets a nice setup on the outside. What about this, right? Black is like, I don't want to help white make any shape on the outside, but this exchange between the stone on the third line and the stone on the second line usually benefits the stone on the outside on the third line. So white definitely does not lose anything by playing this exchange. So that's number 1, I think. And you have to understand why this shoulder hit is played. It's trying to get black to be slightly over-concentrated. And it's not worth it for black to add an extra stone to kill this shoulder hit. So I think that's really one of the most important things to understand about this shape. Before we move on, another move to mention after the shoulder hit and exchange 1 and 2, and that is number 3. This would have been a move that drew a lot of criticism from your teacher if you played this 20 years ago. But this actually exists. Let's say if white already has a stone here on the left side, or is trying to build on the left side, and this is actually okay for white to add a stone here. Of course, in this situation, black is already very strong, and this hane, as we say, is very, very big. This hane against these 2 stones, this is very, very big. But if white really wants, then this is actually okay. And if black cuts, then white actually has this hane, something like this. And black cannot pull this out, right? Because white has this, can capture the corner, so black can't really, so the black's corner will die. So black can't really start this fight because of its own weakness, right? So this cut is actually not as harsh as you think. So the best black can get is trying to play the hane at number 6 and number 8 and trying to build on the upper side. But white gets what it wants, right? And that is the left side. So this move also exists in some situations. Something to keep in mind. And the next viable move is this attachment, which we already saw. And the idea, once again, is for white to prevent black from developing on the upper side. As we mentioned before, the direction of play for this enclosure is the upper side. If white doesn't play, then adding a stone here on the upper side, on the 4th line or 3rd line, will be a very nice setup for black. So if white wants to prevent that, then you can play this attachment right away. There are a few ways for black to respond. One is right here. This is very solid, but if you look at these 3 stones, they're a little too close together, so they're over-concentrated, and white can play away, right? If you play something immediately, then you're going to get pincered and attacked. So maybe it's better to wait when you have a stone right here on the upper right, something like that, sometime down the line, then you can try to pull this stone out, right? And then you can strengthen it by playing the hane and connect, and maybe a tiger's mouth or something like that to strengthen this stone, rather than trying to play something right away, right? This is going to be 4 on 2, and this is not going to be a good fight for white. So white should just leave it and wait for other opportunities to play off of number 1. But this exchange alone does not benefit black, because black is over-concentrated, and the corner territory is already black's, right? You do not need to worry about the corner territory as white in any of these situations, because it is already black's territory. And the best you can do is to prevent black from further developing on the left side, on the upper side, and toward the center. And number 1 already does that, right? Adding a stone here, playing this exchange, already reduces the possibility of black gaining a strong influence on the upper side. Similarly, as we saw, an exchange between a stone on the third line and a stone on the second line is a good exchange for the stone on the third line. Just a rule of thumb. What about this hane on the fourth line? Then this will be very similar, right? Once again, black needs to be wary of this hane. Of course, it can play on top, but the corner is actually pretty big, pretty comfortable. Of course, black can get a wall on the outside, but I'll be okay as white. White gets sente, and the corner territory is already white's. And I think white can be satisfied in this variation. So that is why, under most circumstances, black will stand down here or connect here. But again, if you connect, this is very over-concentrated, and white will just play an extension on the upper side. If you play here, then a forcing move is actually number 5. This is a forcing move. You might be thinking black should play on the upper side, but this Atari is huge, right? This Atari is huge. This exchange is just huge. So black cannot afford to allow white to play the Atari. It's actually very, very big. So when white plays number 5, black has to extend, right, for its own shape. This is on the 5th line if you count from the left side. So this is a good way for black to potentially develop on the left side here. And of course, white will probably add a stone, 3-space extension, right, on the upper side. This is viable for both sides. Lastly, the hane on the second line. It's not very common because white can always play this hane. And black, once again, cannot just capture number 3 because of its own weaknesses. There are just too many cutting points. You just cannot play on number 10, right? If you play on number 10, then white will just play all these Atari moves and take over the corner territory and cut off this enclosing stone. This is not okay for black. And even if it's something like this, still, this is not great for black to have this enclosing stone cut off. So that is why the best black can do is probably something like this. And once again, white will get to play on the upper side. I think number 7 here is still forcing, right? This Atari is still huge. And this is just adding number 2 and 3 to what we saw earlier. It's probably not a good idea, right? You want to preserve this hane for later, right? You don't want to play 8 and 9 right away, right? You want to save that for later. So that is why second line hane a little rare, because white can actually play this move and black cannot capture number 3, right? So I would say that's one of the flaws of the small knight's enclosure, because black actually cannot play very forcefully after white's number 1 and 3. And that is why number 1, this attachment, is a viable move as part of a Joseki against this small knight's enclosure. Alright, now we can look at a few moves that are not viable. In older games, before the age of AI, we might see professional players playing something on the inside early on in a game as a probing move, right? They like to probe. Of course, AI also has probing moves, but those are a little different. They no longer probe like this. Why? If you've been following my Joseki videos, you know why. Because black is always very happy to just allow white to live on the corner, as long as it's very small, right? And this is something that's doable. This is, yeah, white can live, but black is very strong on the outside. Black gets sente. Black is happy to make this exchange, even if white plays it right away, right? So the idea, of course, in the past is that for white to have some kind of reinforcement either on the upper side or the left side or both, right? And now, of course, white can always try to trigger this code right away, right? Or white can connect here, and now black will need to take care of this cutting point on the outside, and yeah, white can live. So that was the idea of this probing move. But even if white lives, right, white doesn't benefit because black gets sente and a very strong wall on the outside. And that is why white no longer plays at number 1, right? Because making a living shape is still not advantageous. Similarly, if you play on the second line, then again, black is just very happy to allow you to live very small on the corner, and black gets a very nice wall on the outside in sente. Right? So these probing moves, right, that are aimed at making a living shape in the corner is no longer viable in the age of AI because the corner is too small, right? Because this is a 3-4 point, this is a small knight's enclosure, and any living shape that white makes inside will be very small. Right? So that's a difference between the 3-4 point and the star point. When we saw star point enclosures, some of those living shapes are acceptable for the side that is taking over the corner territory. But when you try to take over the corner territory under the 3-4 point, it's almost always going to be too small for white in this situation. So if not probing moves, then we might see something like this, a little bit outdated. It turns out black is not really afraid of this move. The idea, of course, is for white to play on either side, right? This is for black to choose. Does black want the upper side or does black want the left side? So of course you're giving black a choice. That's not as good as taking away the choice, right? If white wants to play on the left side, you play the shoulder hit. If white wants to play on the upper side, you play this attachment. It is not as good to allow black the choice. Now you're giving black the choice. If black wants to play on the left side, then it will be something like this, right? And black most likely will get sente in this situation, or maybe you don't have to play number 7, but this is okay. This is fine, I think, for black. And white is not putting as much pressure on black as the shoulder hit or the direct attachment. And if black plays here, then it'll be something like this. So once again, white will have to play at number 5, right? You have to learn these moves. Of course, black cannot capture number 5 because black's shape will be broken this way. So most likely black will just connect and white can play another move, right? Once again, not as forceful because number 2 can always get on the 4th line if black chooses to play on the upper side. So this is actually not bad for black if number 2, right, is black's choice. And number 5 really is the only move, right? You cannot play here this way. These 3 stones have nothing working for them, right? They'll be under attack. If you play here, this is even worse, right? This is not a wall. This is just a weak group. This is really a weak group for white, right? So it's hard to build any good shapes off of number 1. So you might see this move in older games, in some amateur games, but just know that this is no longer the correct move because number 1, you're giving black the choice, and number 2, it's hard to follow up. It's a little hard to follow up. This is not the best wall you can build, right, as white in this situation. And black's shape is always going to be pretty solid. Lastly, we can talk about moves like this. This will be a co-threat, right? You almost never played this. This is a bad exchange, but if there's a big ko elsewhere that you're about to lose, and your opponent wins the ko, this is a co-threat. Number 1 is an effective co-threat against the 3-4 point. And this attachment is not as good because black is not afraid of this hane. If you play this hane, then you're not getting the corner, right? Compare this to what we saw earlier. If it's something like this, then white is really getting the corner. Even number 9 is in sente, right? This way the corner territory is half gone. Whereas if you play this, right, the corner territory is still preserved. And that makes a big difference. So that is why it's very rare for white to play this attachment. Unless, of course, white is trying to build a base like this. But this is not as good. This is just not as good for white. Or even if something like this, right? Still, black's wall is pretty good, and white is on the 3rd line. So number 1, I would say situational. When you really need to build a base, somehow on the left side, do it. But when the board is pretty empty, this is not a good local move. So that's really all you need to know about approaching the small knight's enclosure from the 3-4 point as an amateur player. As always, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Good luck, and thank you for watching.